The zipper on Kira's dress was still halfway up her back when Diane walked through that door. I need you to understand something before I go any further. I have known Diane Calloway for 4 years. 4 years of holiday dinners, where she rearranged the seating without telling anyone. 4 years of birthday cards addressed only to her son. 4 years of comments, so small and so perfectly timed, that you always questioned yourself afterward, wondering if you imagined them. I had her mapped out. I thought I knew exactly what she was and was not capable of. I was wrong. My name is Mara Ellison. I am 29 years old, and I work as a forensic accountant for a mid-size firm in Phoenix, Arizona. My job, quite literally, is to find what people are trying to hide. I look at numbers the way other people look at faces. I read gaps. I read timing. I read the thing that is not there when it should be. And somehow, standing in that bridal suite on the morning of my best friend Kira's wedding, I missed every single warning sign until Diane was already standing in the room, wearing a floor-length tailored white gown with beaded cap sleeves and a small structured train that brushed the carpet when she moved. Not cream. Not blush. Not that soft, warm white that sometimes reads as ivory in photographs. White. Cold, deliberate, statement-making white. If you are new here, please like and subscribe before we go any further, because this story is one you are going to want to come back to. Stay until the end. I promise you, it is worth it. Kira's maid of honor, Jess, saw Diane first. I watched Jess's face do something complicated. That split second, where the brain receives information it does not want to process. And then Jess went very, very still. I followed her eyes. And that was the moment. That was the exact moment Kira's best friend from college, the woman who had known her since freshman orientation, turned her head and looked directly at me across the room. She did not say a word. She did not have to. Because the look said everything. It said, "You see this, right?" It said, "Are we doing something about this?" It said, "I do not know what the plan is, but there needs to be one, and it needs to start right now." I looked back at her, and something in me went completely quiet. Diane was already moving toward Kira, with her arms slightly open, performing the role of the warm, welcoming mother of the groom, the woman who had done nothing wrong, who was simply arriving to celebrate her son's special day. Her voice was bright and slightly breathless from the stairs. "Oh, sweetheart, you look beautiful. I am so sorry. I am late. Parking was absolutely impossible out there." Kira had not turned around yet. She was still facing the mirror, her dress half-zipped, her eyes meeting mine in the reflection. She registered Jess's stillness first. Then she registered the silence in the room. Then her eyes moved slowly to the left, tracking toward the door, and she saw her mother-in-law standing behind her in white. Kira's face did not collapse immediately. That is the part that still gets me when I think about it. She held herself together for a full 4 or 5 seconds. Her jaw tightened, her shoulders pulled back slightly, and then her chin dropped just a fraction of an inch, and her eyes filled, not spilling over, just filling, the way a glass fills right to the edge before it overflows. Diane was still talking. Something about the venue, something about the flowers, something about how she hoped the centerpieces were the right height for photographs. She had not acknowledged the dress. She had not explained it. She had not apologized for it. She had simply arrived in it, the way someone arrives in something they have every right to wear, casual and unapologetic, and daring anyone to make it strange. I had a choice to make in that moment. I could feel it pressing against my ribs. The thing about Diane is that she is not stupid. She is the opposite of stupid. She is the kind of woman who understands exactly how much she can do before someone calls her on it, and she calibrates herself right to that edge, every single time. If someone pointed at the dress and said something, she had an answer ready. She always had an answer ready. I had watched her do it for 4 years, at family dinners, holiday events, casual Sunday visits. She would lean back, look slightly wounded, and say something like, "I just thought it was pretty. I didn't realize it would be a problem. And somehow you were the one apologizing." So I did not point at the dress. I took a breath. I smiled. I told Diane it was so good to see her and asked if she wanted some water because the suite was warm and I knew she'd had a long drive. She accepted the water. She sat down. She started talking to one of Kira's aunts about the ceremony timeline. And I walked to the far corner of the room where Jess was standing, with her arms crossed and her eyes locked on Diane like a hawk, watching something move in tall grass. "What are we doing?" Jess said. Not a question. A statement. "I don't know yet," I said. "But we're not doing nothing." Jess looked at me the same way she had looked at me from across the room. Steady. Waiting. Trusting that I had something forming even when I did not have it yet. I pulled out my phone and texted Kira's older sister, Bryn, who was downstairs coordinating vendors. The text said, "Get up here. Now." No explanation needed. Then I stood there, watching Diane laugh softly at something the aunt said, her white gown catching the light from the window, and I started thinking. Because here is the thing about Diane Calloway that nobody in that room fully understood yet. This dress was not an accident. It was not a misunderstanding. It was not a bold fashion choice made in ignorance. This had been planned. And somewhere between the moment I sent that text and the moment Bryn's footsteps hit the hallway outside the door, I started to understand that the dress was not even the real problem. The dress was just the part she wanted us to see. Bryn walked in and stopped. She took in the room in about 2 seconds flat, the way older sisters do when they have spent a lifetime reading situations before anyone explains them. Her eyes went to Kira, then to Diane, then to the dress, then to me. She did not react visibly. She just walked over to where I was standing, poured herself a glass of water she did not drink, and said quietly, "How long has she been here?" 8 minutes, I said. And nobody has said anything. Nobody has said anything. Bryn exhaled slowly through her nose. Okay. That was it. Just okay. But the way she said it meant something much closer to, "I am going to need a minute to decide which version of myself handles this." I understood that completely. Kira had recovered enough to let Jess finish zipping her dress. She was moving through the motions of getting ready, accepting the small adjustments and the lip gloss touch-ups and the earring help, but her eyes kept drifting back to Diane in the mirror. Not with anger. That was the thing that broke my heart a little. Not with anger. With that specific kind of exhausted recognition that comes from years of being gaslit by someone who smiles while doing it. I had seen that look on Kira's face before, but never this concentrated, never this sharp. Diane, for her part, was performing effortlessly. She had moved into a chair near the window and was showing Kira's aunt something on her phone, laughing lightly, touching her own collarbone in that gesture she used when she wanted to appear relaxed. She had not addressed the dress once. Not a single word. She was waiting for someone else to make it awkward. That was her method. I was starting to really see it now. She did not create scenes. She created conditions, and then she waited for someone else to create the scene, and then she was the victim of it. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Marcus, Kira's fiancé, asking if everything was going okay upstairs. Someone had told him his mother had arrived. I stared at the text for a moment and thought carefully about what to type back. I settled on, "Everything is fine. Kira looks incredible. See you at the altar." I did not mention the dress. Not yet. Because something had started to itch at the back of my mind. Something that felt like more than just anger at a woman who had shown up in white to her son's wedding. It felt like a question I did not have the shape of yet. Why today? Why this specific, irreversible, public way? Diane had been difficult for years. Quietly, strategically difficult. But this was loud. This was visible. This was the kind of move that could not be undone and could not be explained away entirely, no matter how good her answer was. So why make it? What did she get from this particular chaos on this particular morning? I leaned toward Bryn and said, low enough that no one else could hear, Has anything changed recently? With Marcus? Financially? Anything with the family? Bryn looked at me sideways. Why? Just answer. She was quiet for a moment, which was already an answer. Then she said, Marcus's grandfather passed 8 weeks ago, left a trust. The details haven't been shared with everyone yet, but I know there's a property involved. A lake house the family has had for 40 years. I felt something click into place. Not the full picture, just the first edge of it. Who is the trust administered through? I said. Some attorney in Scottsdale. Why are you asking me this right now? Because I don't think the dress is the point, I said. Bryn stared at me. What do you mean? It's not the point. She is wearing a white gown to her son's wedding. I know what she's wearing, I said. I'm asking you to think about what she's distracting us from. The room had shifted slightly. A few more people had arrived, 2 of Kira's cousins and the photographer, who was doing her best to read the energy and stay neutral. Diane had stood up again, and was now complimenting the bouquets in a voice designed to be overheard as charming and generous. Jess appeared at my elbow. Kira needs to start taking photos in 11 minutes. I know. So whatever we're doing, we need to do it. I know, I said again. The thing is, I still did not have a plan. I had a direction. I had a suspicion that was forming itself into something with edges. But a plan was not the same thing. And walking into something half-formed with a woman like Diane was exactly the kind of mistake she relied on people making. So I did the thing that always steadied me when I was working a complicated file at the office. I stopped looking at the problem in front of me and started looking at the timeline. Diane had known about this wedding for 14 months. She had been involved in exactly none of the planning, which Kira had noted with relief at the time. She had confirmed her attendance 6 weeks ago, with no drama, no complaints, no last-minute conditions. She had shown up this morning in a tailored gown that had clearly been fitted, which meant she had purchased it weeks or months ago, stood in a dressmaker's studio, and had someone pin the hem and taken the waist, and said nothing to anyone. That was not impulsive. That was scheduled. And the grandfather had passed 8 weeks ago. The trust was unsettled. The lake house was involved. I looked at Diane standing near the bouquets, laughing her light practice laugh, and I thought, what does a woman like this need from a wedding that she cannot get on a regular Tuesday? Witnesses, I thought. She needs witnesses. I didn't know yet what she was going to do. But I knew she was going to do something. And I knew it was going to happen in front of people. And I knew the dress was not the statement. The dress was the setup. The ceremony was at 2 in the afternoon. It was now 9:57 in the morning. I had 4 hours and 3 minutes to figure out what Diane Calloway was actually planning. And I had exactly one useful tool at my disposal. The thing I do every single day at work, which is follow money until it tells me the truth. I stepped into the hallway outside the bridal suite and called my colleague Petra, who I had worked with for 6 years and who owed me a favor from a case last March that I had never cashed in. She picked up on the second ring. I need you to look something up for me, I said. Probate records. Scottsdale. A trust filed in the last 8 weeks. Family name, Calloway. Petra was quiet for a beat. Mara, it's Saturday. I know what day it is. Another beat. Then, what am I looking for specifically? A property lake house. And any recent amendments to the trust document. Specifically anything filed in the last 30 days. I could hear her typing. You want to tell me why you're pulling probate records at 10 in the morning on a weekend? I'll tell you everything on Monday, I said. Please. She kept typing. I stood in the hallway with my back against the wall and listened to the sounds coming from inside the suite. Diane's voice rising and falling in that bright performed register she used when she wanted to seem like the most comfortable person in the room. Okay, Petra said. Calloway Family Trust. Filed 7 weeks ago. Primary asset is a residential property listed as a lake dwelling outside Prescott. Trustee is the law office of Garfield and Marsh in Scottsdale. There is amendment filed. She paused. Mara, this amendment was filed 4 days ago. 4 days before the wedding. What does it say? I said. I can't get the full document from public records, just the filing notation. But the notation references a clause modification regarding a surviving spouse provision. I closed my eyes. Surviving spouse. Thank you, I said. I owe you. You owe me significantly, Petra said, and hung up. I stood in that hallway for about 90 seconds and let the picture finish assembling itself. Harold Calloway, Marcus's grandfather, had left a trust. The primary asset was the lake house, 40 years in the family. And 4 days ago, someone had filed an amendment to the trust that touched a surviving spouse provision. The only surviving spouse in that family structure. The only person whose marital status would be legally relevant to a clause like that was Diane. Diane was not just showing up to cause a scene at her son's wedding. Diane was establishing something. Publicly, visibly, in front of a room full of witnesses, on a day when everyone was paying attention and everything was documented. I went back through every conversation I could remember having with Kira about Marcus's family over the last 4 years. Kira had mentioned once, offhandedly, that Diane and Harold Sr. had never formally divorced. She had said it the way you say something that seems irrelevant, just a strange family footnote. They had been separated for over 20 years, lived completely separate lives, but no legal divorce, which meant Diane was technically still Harold's daughter-in-law by marriage to his son. And if there was a surviving spouse clause in that trust that had just been amended 4 days ago, and if Diane could demonstrate that her marriage to Marcus's father was still legally intact, and that she had been a continuous and present part of this family at the time of Harold's death, I needed to talk to Bryn. I went back into the suite. Kira was sitting in front of the mirror, getting her veil pinned while the photographer circled. Diane was by the window again, scrolling her phone, looking entirely unbothered. I crossed the room to Bryn and touched her arm lightly. I need 5 minutes, I said. We went into the small adjoining bathroom, and I closed the door. I told Bryn everything. The probate search. The amendment. The surviving spouse clause. The timing. I spoke quietly and quickly and watched her face move through disbelief, confusion, and then a slow, settling fury that she pulled back behind her eyes before it could fully surface. She's here to be seen, Bryn said. She's here to be documented, I said. Photographs, a wedding register, vendor receipts that place her at this event as a family member in good standing. She wants a paper trail that puts her inside this family, on the record, on the same day the trust amendment was filed. That's insane, Bryn said. It is, I said. And it might also work if we don't do something about it. Bryn leaned against the sink. What does she actually get, if it works? I don't know the exact clause language, I said, but surviving spouse provisions in family trusts can extend to property rights, residency rights, sometimes a percentage of asset value. The lake house has been in that family for 40 years. In Prescott, that property is worth somewhere between $800,000 and $1,200,000, depending on the lot. Bryn went very still. She's not here for the wedding, I said. She's here for the lake house, Bryn said. And she needed witnesses, I said. And she needed photographs. And she needed to be dressed in a way that no one could argue she wasn't the centerpiece of this event. The white dress was not about humiliating Kira. It was about being impossible to crop out of the photographs. It was about being the most visible person in every image taken that day, undeniably present, undeniably part of the family structure, standing next to the groom at his wedding, while the trust amendment sat freshly filed in a Scottsdale courthouse. I looked at Bryn. We have 3 hours, I said. Bryn straightened up and rolled her shoulders back. Okay, she said, and this time the word had a completely different weight to it. Okay, I agreed. We opened the bathroom door and walked back out into the light. The first call Bryn made was to her father. She stepped into the hallway while I went back to the suite and positioned myself near Diane. Not close enough to be obvious, just close enough to hear. Diane was telling one of the cousins about a renovation she was considering on her condo, describing tile samples and countertop finishes in the breezy, unhurried way of someone who believed she had already won. I smiled when she glanced at me. She smiled back. 4 years of watching her operate, and she still had no idea what I did for a living, beyond something with numbers. That had always mildly irritated Kira. Right now it felt like an advantage. Bryn came back in 11 minutes. She touched my elbow and we drifted toward the corner. Dad called Garfield and Marsh, she said, got through to an associate who confirmed the amendment exists, but wouldn't discuss specifics without the primary attorney present. But Dad knows someone who clerks for a judge in Maricopa County. He's making a second call. What are we asking for? I said. We're not asking for anything yet, Bryn said. We're building documentation of our own. Dad is going to have someone draft an affidavit today, before the ceremony, establishing that Diane and Marcus's father have been functionally separated for over 2 decades, with no shared residence, no shared finances, and no active marital relationship. It won't be notarized until Monday, but the draft will be time-stamped today. I looked at her. Your father did all of that in 11 minutes. My father is a very motivated man when his daughter is involved, Bryn said flatly. That was the moment I felt something release slightly in my chest. Not relief exactly. More like the particular steadiness that comes when you stop working alone. The next thing we needed was the photographs. I found the photographer, a calm professional woman named Denise, who had shot 3 of Bryn's friends' weddings, and came with a reputation for being unflappable. I pulled her aside and explained the situation in broad strokes. I did not tell her everything. I told her enough. I need you to document the morning as it actually is, I said. Every candid, every position, every person in this room. And I need the metadata intact, timestamps on everything. Denise looked at me steadily. I always shoot with full metadata. I know, I said. I just need you to know it matters today specifically. She nodded once and went back to work. The third piece was the one I had been thinking about since the hallway conversation with Bryn. If Diane was here to establish presence and generate documentation, the most effective counter was not confrontation. It was contamination of her own record. A woman who shows up to a wedding in a white tailored gown intending to be photographed as a dignified family figure is not well served by what actually happened next. Jess had been watching me from across the room for the last 40 minutes, with the patience of someone who understood that a plan was in motion, even when she could not see all the pieces. I crossed to her and told her what I needed. Her eyes lit up in a way that I appreciated deeply. How much of a mess, she said. Enough that it reads clearly in photographs, I said. Nothing that involves anyone else. Jess considered this for approximately 4 seconds. Then she said, leave it with me. I went to sit with Kira. Kira was quieter than she should have been on her wedding morning. Not devastated, not anymore, but carrying that specific weight that comes from a person you have tried to make peace with for years, doing something that removes all remaining doubt. She was holding her bouquet and turning it slowly in her hands. I know what you're doing, she said without looking up. Which part? I said. All of it, she said. I've been watching you for 2 hours. I sat down beside her. Are you okay with it? Kira looked up then. Her eyes were dry. Her jaw was set in a way I recognized from every time she had been backed into a corner and found her way out of it quietly, without anyone noticing she had been in one. She planned this for months, Kira said. Yes. She had that dress fitted. Yes. She filed something with the trust. I looked at her. Bryn told you. Bryn tells me everything, Kira said. We're sisters-in-law. That's how it works. She paused. How much is the lake house worth? Somewhere between 800,000 and just over $1 million, I said, depending on the lot and current market. Kira was quiet for a moment. Then she said, and she thought she could walk into my wedding and take it. She thought no one would see the whole picture in time, I said. Kira turned the bouquet once more. Do you see the whole picture? Most of it, I said honestly. Enough. She nodded. And then she did something that caught me off guard. She reached over and straightened the thin strap on my bridesmaid dress. A small, automatic, completely ordinary gesture, the kind a person makes when they are grounded enough to notice small things. "Don't let her be in the photos," Kira said. "She won't be," I said. What happened in the next 40 minutes was not dramatic. It was methodical. Jess executed her piece with a precision that genuinely impressed me. Diane's dress sustained a navigational mishap involving a tray of mimosas near the window, the fault of no one in particular, simply an unfortunate collision of movement and glassware in a crowded suite. The result was a long, pale stain across the front of the white gown that read distinctly in every photograph taken afterward. Diane's reaction was loud and immediate and extremely well documented by Denise's camera, which was simply doing its job. The resulting images told a story. Just not the one Diane had planned. By the time the ceremony hour arrived, Diane had retreated to the venue bathroom to attempt damage control on a dress that could not be salvaged. She missed the family portraits entirely. She missed the bridal party entrance. She appeared in the reception, composed and wearing a jacket borrowed from someone's husband to cover the damage. But the window she had built this entire plan around had closed. The photographs from that morning showed a beautiful bride, a loving family, a room full of people who were present and joyful and clearly where they belonged. Diane was not in a single one. The wedding was beautiful. I want to say that plainly because sometimes in the middle of everything falling apart and being put back together, the actual center of the day gets lost. Kira walked down the aisle with her father, and she looked the way people look when they have earned something, not just arrived at it. Marcus cried before she was halfway to him. The hoopah was covered in white roses and trailing greenery, and the afternoon light came through the venue windows at exactly the right angle. And for about 45 minutes, the whole world was simple. I stood in my place in the bridal party, and I let myself just be there. Diane sat in the third row on the groom's side in her borrowed jacket and did not make a scene during the ceremony. That surprised me slightly. But I think by then she understood that something had shifted, and she was recalculating. People like Diane are very good at recalculating. They can absorb a setback and go still and wait for the next opening with a patience that most people do not have. What she did not know yet was that the opening she was waiting for had already been closed. Bryn's father had reached his contact in Maricopa County before the ceremony began. The affidavit had been drafted and time-stamped. More importantly, a family attorney had been placed on call for Monday morning to formally contest the trust amendment on the grounds of the separation timeline and a clause in the original document that specifically defined active marital participation. I did not fully understand all of the legal language, that was not my area, but I understood the structure of it. Diane had filed an amendment 4 days before the wedding, hoping to establish a record of presence and family standing. What she had actually created was a documented attempt to manipulate a trust instrument that now had a formal challenge attached to it before the ink was fully dry. The reception was warm and loud and full of dancing. I ate too much of the salted caramel cake, and I danced with Jess until my feet ached, and I gave a toast that made Kira cry in the good way, which was the goal. Diane approached me once, near the end of the evening, after the first dances, when the room had loosened enough that a private conversation was possible. She came to stand beside me at the edge of the dance floor, and she looked out at the room and she said, very quietly, "You're smarter than I gave you credit for." I looked at her. "I know," I said. She smiled. It was not a warm smile. "This isn't over." "I know that too," I said, "but today is." She held my gaze for a moment, and then she turned and walked back toward her table, and I watched her go, and I felt something that was not quite victory and not quite relief. Something more like the particular exhaustion that comes from a fight you did not ask for but refused to lose. Kira found me about 20 minutes later. She had her heels in one hand and her bouquet in the other. and she leaned her head against my shoulder for exactly 3 seconds, which was the most Kira had ever outwardly expressed that something had mattered to her. "Thank you," she said. "You would have figured it out," I said. "Maybe," she said, "but not in time." We stood there for a moment listening to the music. "What happens Monday?" she said. "The attorney files the formal challenge," I said. "The amendment gets scrutinized. The separation timeline gets documented. And Diane's presence at this wedding, which she planned so carefully to help her, ends up being part of the record that shows she was attempting to establish standing she legally doesn't have." Kira absorbed this. "So, she built her own trap." "She handed us the evidence," I said. "We just made sure it was recorded correctly." Kira was quiet for a moment. The dress is in about 400 photographs, with a mimosa stain across the front," I said, "none of which show her standing next to the groom in a dignified family portrait, all of which show her reacting to a spill in a way that is not particularly flattering." Kira made a sound that was almost a laugh. "Jess?" "Jess?" I confirmed. The challenge to the trust amendment was filed the following Monday morning. The process took several months, the way legal processes do, grinding forward in increments that require patience and documentation and the willingness to show up every time the paperwork requires it. I won't walk you through all of it, but I will tell you that the original trust document contained a clause that defined active marital participation as continuous shared residence or financial interdependence within the preceding 10 years. Diane and Marcus's father had not had either for over 2 decades. The amendment was ultimately invalidated. The lake house remained with the trust as originally intended, passing to Marcus and his 2 siblings in equal shares. Diane did not attend Christmas that year, or the year after. Marcus handled it the way people handle things, when they slowly understand that a parent they have defended for years made a choice that was impossible to defend. Quietly, with grief, and without drama. Kira gave him the space to do that because Kira is the kind of person who understands that loving someone means letting them process things at their own pace, even when the thing they're processing is difficult. I think about that morning sometimes. The bridal suite, the white dress, Jess's face across the room. The moment Bryn said okay and meant something completely different from okay. The way Kira straightened my strap and said, "Don't let her be in the photos." I have been asked many times since then what made me start pulling probate records at 10 in the morning on a Saturday. And the honest answer is that it was not instinct, and it was not cleverness. It was just the thing I always do when something feels wrong. I follow the thing that is not there, and then I wait for the truth to show me what belongs in its place. If this story stayed with you, please give it a like. Share it with someone who would understand exactly why Kira's shoulder lean meant everything. Drop a comment if you have ever been in a room and known, without anyone saying a word, that something was about to happen. And if you are not subscribed yet, this is your sign. We will see you next time.